Morgellons disease discussion and microscopy videos. I'm your host, Jeremy Murphy, and today I want to talk about the science that has been established about Morgellons and what has been disproven. You know, every time I get on YouTube or Facebook, I see somebody out there who claims that they know what's going on with Morgellons. It's a biological weapon and it's killing everybody. But they fail to read these right here. This is called a peer-reviewed approved. Furthermore, it says if you look that it was accepted for publication, right? It was checked for plagiarism, that's true. Single blind, this is a blind controlled study, yes it is. So, now that we got that out of the way, what does this study say about Morgellons disease? Well, here's the abstract, and hang around because I'm going to read a lot of this to you. Morgellons disease is a skin condition characterized by the presence of multicolored filaments that lie under or embedded in or project from the skin. Although the condition may have a longer history, the disease matching the above description was first reported in the United States in 2002. Since that time, the condition that we know as Morgellons disease has become a polemic topic. Clinical studies supporting the hypothesis that Morgellons disease is exclusively delusional in origin have considerable methodological flaws that often neglect the fact that mental disorders can result from underlying somatic illness. In contrast, rigorous experimental investigations show that this skin affliction results from a physiological response to the presence of an infectious agent. Recent studies from that point of view show an association between Morgellons disease and spirochetal infection in humans, cattle, and dogs. These investigations have determined that the cutaneous filaments are not implanted textile fibers, but are composed of the cellular proteins keratin and collagen and result from overproduction of these filaments in response to spirochetal infection. Further studies of the genetics, pathogenesis, and treatment of Morgellons disease are warranted. So, is this the first time you've heard about this study right here? Did you know that there's actually peer-reviewed, blind-controlled studies that demonstrate Morgellons as a result of an infection? The reason you may not have heard about this information is because there is a concentrated effort to bury it. There are people who want you to think that Morgellons fibers do not originate from inside the body as the study demonstrates. They want you to think that they are fibers that are dropped from airplanes that you breathe in and are coming out of your skin. But that's not what the science shows, not at all. They want you to believe that this is all in your head, that the fibers are nothing more than textile fibers you picked up from your clothes or on your bed sheets. But that's not what this says at all. People are ignoring the science. But the answer is right here in plain sight for everybody to see. In plain sight for everyone to see. Who cares to read it? But they won't, because they want to keep control of the issue. Like the study says, there are studies which suggest that Morgellons is purely psychosomatic. That means that there are people who have invested time and money into proving that hypothesis. So what else is in the study that's of interest? Fiber analysis. Histological studies have shown that filaments in Morgellons disease tissue are not textile fibers, but are biofilaments produced by human epithelial cells and stemming from deeper epidermal layers, upper dermal layers, and the root sheath of hair follicles. Morgellons disease cutaneous filaments are predominantly composed of keratin and collagen, as determined by histological studies, and appear to be produced by activated keratinocytes and fibroblasts. The base of filament attachment to epithelial cells demonstrates nucleation that is continuous with that of surrounding epithelial cells, indicating that the filaments are of human cellular origin. Histochemical staining of the skin sections containing embedded filaments with Congo red resulted in apple green birefringence suggestive of an amyloid component. Cauliflower white staining of skin sections with embedded filaments was negative, and thus Morgellons filaments do not have any cellulose content from plant fibers such as cotton or chitin, or fungal cells or insect endoskeletons. We know that it is not a fungus, but what else does this study tell us? Borrelia spirochetes can invade and replicate inside fibroblasts and keratinocytes and have been isolated in vitro from monolayers of keratinocytes and fibroblasts despite antibiotic treatment. Sequestration in these cells may be a contributing factor in the development of refractory infection in Morgellons disease patients. In support of that hypothesis, Borrelia spirochetes were detected in Morgellons disease skin specimens removed from patients treated with aggressive antibiotic therapy. Hypothetically, intracellular infection of keratinocytes and fibroblasts would be able to alter keratin and collagen gene expression, respectively, resulting in unusual filament formation. Some patients report that gel was secreted from their skin. We sectioned these dried gel secretions and found immunostating targeted to Borrelia was positive and demonstrated a copious quantity of well-formed spirochetes embedded in a clear matrix. This finding is consistent with biofilm formation. The spirochetal load in Morgellons disease specimens is high and suggests biofilm formation in vivo. The formation of biofilms may also contribute to the severity of the dermopathy and antibiotic resistance. So what else could we learn? Although there is anecdotal evidence that Morgellons disease responds to antibiotics, controlled studies of Morgellons disease treatment with antibiotics have not been conducted. Optimal treatment for Morgellons disease remains undetermined. Two of the authors report success in treating Lyme disease Morgellons disease patients with antibiotics. In general, early treatment contributes to a better patient outcome. Treatment aimed at the underlying tick-borne disease is essential to resolve Morgellons disease dermopathy, and treatment may require both prolonged combination antibiotic therapy and the identification and treatment of any co-infecting tick-borne diseases or other exacerbating factors. Some patients benefit from antiparasitic therapy, although there appears to be no direct evidence of parasitic infection in Morgellons disease. But what else can we learn? This is a good one. I like this one right here. There is a significant overlap in the array of symptoms that may accompany Lyme disease, Morgellons disease, and mental illness, thus complicating the diagnosis. In theory, patients who do not have Morgellons disease but who are delusional could think they have Morgellons disease if they have had exposure to the topic through the internet or other means. To complicate the diagnosis further, Morgellons disease patients may exhibit neuropsychiatric symptoms and may have psychiatric diagnoses such as bipolar disorder, attention deficit disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and schizophrenia. Therefore, many Morgellons disease patients may have psychiatric comorbidities, and in some cases, patients have been misdiagnosed with a psychiatric illness that they do not have. Some Morgellons disease patients may have false beliefs that are not delusional in origin. Lack of scientific knowledge can cause patients to misinterpret symptoms such as the presence of filaments and sensations of formication as worms, arthropods, or other infestations. In addition, Morgellons disease lesions are sticky. Arthropods or artifacts can adhere to exudate. The patients may incorrectly believe these external factors are associated with the dermopathy. But what else can we learn? The DSM-5 does not mention delusions of parasitosis, delusional infestation, or delusional parasitosis. In fact, the case of delusional disorder, 297.1, delusions are not the beliefs themselves, but the way they are interpreted by patients. Delusions are profound, intensely held beliefs that seem barely swayed by evidence to the contrary, even to the point of believing in the bizarre. In contrast, the presence of human biofibers embedded in the skin of Morgellons disease patients is factual. The patients are not hallucinating imaginary fibers, and they are not implanting textile fibers or hallucinating an imaginary infestation. Morgellons disease is not a case of fixed beliefs despite the lack of medical evidence, because if fibers are present and they are visible under magnification, then there is medical evidence. Morgellons disease fibers projecting from and embedded in the skin may have elaborate configurations with branching, and the filaments may have tapered ends. Even skilled microsurgeons could not implant the fibers in that configuration. Well, what else could we learn? If you want to learn more, download the study. Check it out. Read it. It is absolutely peer-reviewed, blind-controlled, accepted for publication, and it's not screwing around. So if you see somebody coming up to you talking about the chemtrails, talking about the demons, the aliens, the GMOs, the madness, the mayhem, and the bullshit, direct them to this study and tell them to kindly fuck off about your disease.
I love it. It's good.
Your host, Jeremy Murphy, and joining us today is a very special guest, Doctor of Nursing Practice and author of Morgellons, of the disease, Dr. Ginger Savoy. Hey, Dr. Savoy, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being with us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your practice?
Yes, I've had a practice specializing in treating tick-borne diseases now for quite a while, and so it just sort of happened. I originally was in family practice taking care of primary care needs, but as I began to see more Lyme disease patients, I just gradually ended up specializing in that. That happens to a lot of us who go down that road. We may not start out intending to specialize in it, but we find that we do. And it's very, very interesting. And that's when back in about 2003, I started finding patients with the symptoms of Morgellons disease. And so I kind of developed a subspecialty in that, once again, not really intending to, but it just kind of fell in my lap, you know.
And so that led you to write this book.
Right. And so I finally, I get a lot of phone calls and emails and questions from healthcare providers, patients, all over the world. And so I thought it would make things a little easier to put things down where I could the book because I don't really have the time to spend talking to everybody who wants to talk to me. And so I felt like it would be easier just to get it all down there in writing. It took me a while to convince myself. Yeah.
It's a helpful it's a very beneficial in my journey. But of course, it's one part of the equation, and the other part is finding a practitioner who can utilize the information in the book. How can Morgellons patients find doctors like yourself who treat the condition?
Well, I think the first step is usually to try to find somebody who is they're often called LLMDs, Lyme literate MDs. When we say Lyme, we basically mean people who specialize in all tick-borne diseases. Lyme is just sort of the easy way of saying it because all of the tick-borne infections tend to come together as a package deal. But I find that at least if you can find somebody who is aware of tick-borne diseases, open-minded about all that and trying to treat them, that's your best bet because they are going to be, first of all, just more open-minded, and also because if they've been attending the Lyme conferences, we've been talking a lot about Morgellons disease in the Lyme conferences over the last several years and the association with Lyme disease. So anyway, that's always a good place to start. I realize that they're not even easy to come by either, though. But usually people can find a Lyme disease support group in their state, and they can find, talk to other people and find out who these people are. But it is often hard to find because I have to say that most of the doctors who do treat unusual things, like Morgellons disease, kind of need to stay under the radar because they worry about their license. And so because they're staying under the radar, it's hard for patients to find them too. It's simply a word of mouth thing.
And even as the scientific data comes out, there's still reserved to address the condition because of that stigma.
Absolutely. Even Lyme disease, we know exactly what causes that, and yet it's still very, very controversial treating Lyme disease just because there's so many people out there that don't believe that it's anything other than a very simple, easy to cure infection.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's of course not the case at all.
Right, exactly.
Does everyone have Morgellons? Is it an environmental condition?
I think that it might be, I don't think everybody has it, no, but I do think it might be just out there, fairly easy to come in contact with, but that only certain people succumb to it. Even we find that to be true even with Lyme disease, that some people get bitten by a tick, they even acquire the Lyme bacteria, but they never get sick from it. And we do know that there are certain genetic propensities for people to succumb to certain kinds of illnesses. And that's what we're trying to work on now in terms of Morgellons disease, because even the patients who have Lyme, we found that 6% of Lyme disease patients get Morgellons disease. Well, if there's an association between the two, which we're starting to suspect, but we can't prove for sure, but there seems to be an association between Lyme disease and Morgellons disease, well, then why do only 6% of Lyme patients get it? Well, there's got to be some sort of other key here, like probably some genetic predisposition. And so I think that's often the case with a lot of diseases that are out there. Just some people are going to be more likely to get them than others.
Now, that study that you mentioned, where 6% of Lyme patients present with Morgellons condition, what's the sample size of that study? Do you know?
Well, there were two studies. One was done in Australia, and one was done in San Francisco. Two different people, and it was interesting. They both came up with the same number of 6%. And the study in San Francisco used a couple of hundred Lyme patients. I honestly do not know the study in Australia, how big of a sample size that was. But it was kind of interesting that it came up with the exact same 6%. But
yeah, that is very telling, but of what it's telling, we're just not sure yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Do all Morgellons patients have clogged up pores, and what is the material that clogs them?
Well, I think that, yes. The thing is that Morgellons patients produce a lot of excess, proteins, and these things are not supposed to be produced in the quantities that they're produced and places they're produced. And so when the cells of the Morgellons patients start just overproducing different proteins, it makes sense that things in the outer skin would get kind of clogged up with excess junk, excess waste. And the fibers that come out, the filaments that come out, we have shown those to be produced. Those are made of keratin and collagen, which are the body's own proteins, so made by our body. But our body isn't supposed to be making those things in that quantity in those places. We're supposed to be keratin is definitely something that the body's supposed to be producing, but it's not supposed to be producing it in all over the skin and making filaments that come out of the skin. So I think that when you talk about clogged up pores, I don't necessarily see that, but maybe I think people describe things in different ways, and I think that that's what's going on, is just this excess production of matter. That's kind of a simple way to say it, but
typically it's lesions. There are little white bumps, protrusions. I've heard them described as vehicular casts. And anytime we sent them off to a lab, personally, they've been reported as just being subcutaneous material, like you said, keratin and collagen.
Right, exactly, and that's what they are. And the big question is, why is this happening? Why are certain people who end up having this disease, why are their cells all of a sudden going awry like this and doing this? Yeah.
So when Morgellons patients are picking, what they're really doing is extracting material, their own proteins, but that's been irregularly produced and is causing pressure underneath the skin.
Absolutely, and it's totally understandable. And I think a lot of doctors are saying that the picking is the psychiatric symptom, that people are just gouging at themselves for no reason. But it's very clearly there's a reason for it, and the thing is, if you've got things underneath the skin that are trying to come out, that are causing pain and pressure and discomfort, of course you're going to want to try to remove those things. And so it's understandable that people do spend a lot of time trying to extract those. I don't think that's a sign that somebody's crazy. I think that's an adaptive thing, you know.
From personal experience, I know it kind of turns people off that instead of going to a doctor to get them extracted, it's a self-extraction process. Do doctors do this process now that we have scientific data that legitimizes the condition?
No, they don't. They don't. And I remember one time I had a patient in San Francisco who he said that there's something in her thumb that deep down in there, and it was just hurting her so much, and she wanted to get it out. And she insisted I send her to a surgeon, and so I did. I sent her to a hand surgeon, and I guess he did try cutting in there, and he couldn't find anything, which led him to believe that she was crazy because he was not able to find anything under there. And so, unfortunately, I think most doctors aren't going to go in there and start digging out something that they can't readily see. No. And I don't know what to say about that, or why that's the case, or why they can't find these things. I don't know. I certainly know that when I would try to do biopsies on patients in my office, I would certainly have these very tough fibers in the patient that would go deep down under the skin, where I could not extract them. I just wasn't physically strong enough to do it. And sometimes I would even try to cut them, and it was very difficult to even cut them out. So I think it's very hard to extract these things possibly because they're just so deeply embedded.
Then they're really just a part of our body.
Yeah, they obviously go down to deep levels, but there's just no way we've been able to find out yet how. And, a lot of my patients really feel that these things are connected in a network underneath them, almost like as though they look like Spider-Man under their skin, as though there are these webs of these fibers that are connected, and there's just no way to know for sure whether that's the case.
So what treatment has been demonstrated to work?
Well, the frustrating part about treating this is that every patient seems to be so different. And every time I land on a great treatment for one patient, and I'm like, yes, this is it. Then the next patient, it doesn't work at all. So who knows what that means, right? But generally, it's been a combination of antibiotics, antifungals, antiparasitics, antihelminthics, things that are designed to kill bacteria and viruses and fungi and even worms. Why these things are working, it's hard to know for sure, because after all, we don't even know exactly what we're targeting here. But since these people do tend to have underlying infections of Lyme disease or other tick-borne infections, I've always figured, well, hey, let's go after those things, let's treat those things, and thereby unburdening the immune system, so the immune system will have more ability to handle whatever is causing Morgellons disease. So that's always been the approach, really, in treating these people, is discovering every possible thing that could be burdening their immune system and trying to remove or handle those things so that the burden on the immune system will be lightened. And, that's about what well, the only way you can approach something like this, when you're treating something that you don't know what it is, you just basically have to work on the immune system, helping the immune system. So just by trial and error, I've found that giving various things, antibiotics and antiepileptics, have helped these patients. But I can't say for certain why they've helped. Because just because you give an antibiotic and somebody gets better, you can't thereby say, oh, that proves it was a bacteria. Things work for different purposes than for which they were intended. And so sometimes we don't really know what we're doing with the things we're using.
Do you feel like Morgellons is a biofilm condition, much like cystic fibrosis?
Well, I do think there probably, yes, I really do think there's biofilms here. We found the alginate, which is one of the primary substances in biofilm, and that has definitely been found in the lesions. And, biofilm is a way that bacteria coalesce and kind of stick themselves together, so that's a safety in numbers kind of a thing, so that they can protect themselves. They're sort of glued together in a mass, and this alginate, it serves as the glue in the biofilm often, and this has been in the lesions and the exudates from patients, the laboratories that have been working on this. And remember, the few laboratories that have been working on this disease have been doing so out of the goodness of their own hearts. We can't get any significant funding. It's all private donations, and people, scientists,